And it is wrong to say that it is only the Hindu temples that are taken over. Other places of worship are also regulated.
Okay, Sai Deepak.
With all due respect to Mr. Sanjay Hegde, I think his position is rife with populism and factual inaccuracies, and I'm sorry to say that he's just put on stark display his ignorance of how the law functions as far as this area is concerned. Because SGPC Act certainly exists, but what Mr. Hegde is certainly not aware of is that the SGPC Act specifically refers to a process of election of the members who govern that particular body, as opposed to the process of appointment that happens in Jagannath Puri Mandir or Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam or any number of institutions. So there is a clear distinction between election as a process and appointment by the state government, which clearly shows that the existence of legislation itself is not sufficient. So that's point number one, where I think Mr. Hegde has got it really wrong.
Well, first and foremost, Rahul, I think you are playing a popular trope that it's only Hindu places of worship that are regulated by law. There is the SGPC Act. There is also the Ajmer Dargah Act. There are the Waqf Acts. There is always a place for law to regulate the non-religious parts of religion, in terms of, we say, like there will be transactions, there will be properties, there will be so many other things which do not impinge on the essential religious faith, essential religious beliefs. There always is a place in law. Now, you must also understand that our constitution was written a man. Largely, the drafting committee was headed by a man who said, I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. Our constitution has specific provisions against untouchability in any form. Please also remember that there have been a lot of temples which have practiced untouchability in one form or the other. Be it the Vaikom temple in Kerala. Even today, Sai Deepak, I can see he's shaking his head, but Sai Deepak has argued that women of a particular age cannot enter the Sabrimala temple. There may be Hindus who do not share that belief. Now, which set of Hindu beliefs is to rule? Ultimately, the law has to come in. Ultimately, there have to be regulations. Now, if you say that there has to be no law whatsoever and that it has to be free for all, it has to go on with one community taking over all the temples, that may be your view, you may be entitled to it, but the constitutional scheme currently does not allow that. And it is wrong to say that it is only the Hindu temples that are taken over. Other places of worship are also regulated.
Okay, Sai Deepak.
With all due respect to Mr. Sanjay Hegde, I think his position is rife with populism and factual inaccuracies, and I'm sorry to say that he's just put on stark display his ignorance of how the law functions as far as this area is concerned. Because SGPC Act certainly exists, but what Mr. Hegde is certainly not aware of is that the SGPC Act specifically refers to a process of election of the members who govern that particular body, as opposed to the process of appointment that happens in Jagannath Puri Mandir or Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam or any number of institutions. So there is a clear distinction between election as a process and appointment by the state government, which clearly shows that the existence of legislation itself is not sufficient. So that's point number one, where I think Mr. Hegde has got it really wrong. Point number one. Point number two, the assumption that the moment this comes back to the community, it leads to untouchability and, let's say, prohibition on entry of untouchables. I'm sorry to say, is Mr. Hegde not aware of any number of private temples which are in the country today, and are all these private temples practicing untouchability? Is that the argument that he wishes to present? And three, untouchability under Article 17 is a constitutional provision which no legislation can overturn. So merely because we are asking for community to control its temples, it doesn't mean that all sorts of practices will come back. To say that the community is incapable of managing its institutions without observing untouchability is to actually brand the entire Hindu community as a casteist community. I'm so sorry. What kind of an argument is he making? And point number 3, how can you even compare Sabarimala, which is a very different issue, from this particular issue? Do you understand the fact that Sabarimala is a very different issue with respect to very specific religious practice which has got nothing to do with secular aspects of administration? Is that the issue that is being discussed here today? The issue that is being discussed is with respect to secular aspects of administration. Should the state have control over it, or should the community have control over it? Please highlight to me which church has been taken over by the state citing corruption, when there are any number of cases which abound with respect to corruption in church ecosystem. Which mosque has been taken over by the state, so to speak, to show that there is malfeasance in administration, therefore the state must take over. So let us not muddle facts here. If we don't know what we are talking about on a particular subject, it's always better to maintain a dignified silence as opposed to exposing our ignorance on what exactly the law says on these issues. And I don't think he's actually read the HRC Act as far as the Tamil Nadu government is concerned, the TNHRC Act of 1959. There are specific provisions which prevent untouchability from coming back. So nobody is asking for those provisions to be taken away. We are only saying that those aspects of the provisions which give a big brotherly position to the state to preside over all aspects of these institutions must go. And nobody is saying that the state does not have the power to set the house in order in terms of corruption. But the state cannot be a permanent tenant.
Yes.
The state cannot sit there for eternity. That is the limited position. If it is the state's position that it has not been able to set the house in order and if it's not been able to rectify corruption, that is because the state is fundamentally corrupt and the state has actually worsened situations of corruption in most of these institutions, and it has degraded the entire temple ecosystem to the extent that idols and murtis and jewels are constantly stolen. The Madras High Court actually has come out with a judgment clearly showing that state officials, HRC officials along with state police officials were hand in glove with smugglers of idols and jewels. This is the status of the temple ecosystem under the government administration. I'm sorry, this position really needs no rebuttal because it's not rooted in fact. These are the facts, and these facts are publicly recorded. I think Mr. Hegde should read up his law on the subject better.
Okay.